We have loved most of the moves of this new regime, but they made a surprising one on Thursday, deciding to extend edge rusher Bud Dupree, which is pretty head-scratching considering he wasn't great in 2024.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, the Chargers extended Bud Dupree. I am a little bit surprised at this move, but hey, we'll see how it works out. It's definitely insurance for the Chargers edge rusher room. And J.K. Dobbins is taking a trip to Denver, and he possibly might sign, which means a potential comp pick for the Bolts. And we're going to talk about some surprise players that might be on the roster bubble.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting 53-man roster when everything shakes out, because it is a pretty competitive roster, especially on the back end. But this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. David, the extension we were all waiting for, as we've joked about. No, not exactly. The Chargers decided to extend Bud Dupree this week, and it was very interesting because it was not on my radar as far as a move that could possibly happen. I mean, I think mostly just because he was not super effective as a pass rusher last year, not a consistently good pass rusher last year, but according to Adam Schefter, the deal is worth up to $6 million, and as we've seen with Joe Ortiz, that up to can do a lot of the heavy lifting with some of these contracts. So I don't think it's a gross overpay or anything like that, but I do think it's just interesting, David, because Bud Dupree, I thought, was a position that maybe they could improve upon. Somebody I was like, hey, maybe you go try to find a Jadeveon Clowney or someone like that to kind of upgrade that edge 3 or 4 position. Instead, the Chargers decided to extend him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I saw the move, I was bewildered. I was very surprised. I was just not expecting this type of extension to come for Bud Dupree. We're talking about, your fourth edge rusher who, had his obvious deficiencies last year, as we saw, and we'll get into kind of the stats there. But it's just not exactly a move I thought that the Chargers were going to make. It just when we're talking about these type of contracts for these players that are plus 30. And you look at the production, I don't know if it really matched. And I'm with you. I think that this is a position and a part of the position that could have been upgraded, I think, for similar money.
It is just interesting that the fact that they want to keep him around specifically. And I think for me, the hardest part to swallow here is just, even though he had the 6 sacks, which we'll talk about, I mean, that is, tied for second on the team with Khalil Mack. But I just think that that's kind of oversimplifying, the edge rusher position in general. So to me, the most concerning part is last year, out of 93 players with at least 200 pass rushing snaps, Bud Dupree ranked 92nd in pass rush win percentage. That's second to worst out of anyone. Obviously, that's not great. He ranked 49th in pass rush snaps, but only 68th in total pressures. He got a lot of opportunities, and he just wasn't great. And I think he isn't as bad of a run defender as Pro Football Focus's grade gave him, but it's hard to be much worse than that because he ranked 97th out of 115 eligible edge rushers in run defense grade, minimum 100 run defense snaps. So it's just one of those deals where it's like, it's hard for me to see on a surface level why this was a priority for this team at this time.
Yeah, no, I completely understand it. And then I think for me, the only kind of logical reasoning for me is they know that Khalil Mack at this point is on a year-to-year type of basis, and we know that the last couple of years he's very seriously considered retirement, and so had to kind of be convinced to come back. So, at some point in time, whether it's after this season or maybe they get him back for one more, but I think this might be it. We all know that Khalil Mack's ultimate goal is to win a championship, and if he doesn't feel like the Chargers are the team that's going to be able to get him there, he's either going to go to another team or he's going to retire. So I think this, in a sense, is some kind of insurance for the edge rusher position, if when in doubt, the Khalil Mack decision is made.
It'll be interesting. Obviously, this year there was, uncertainty on whether Khalil Mack would retire, and it felt like it was at least, partially a chance, but like it always kind of felt like he was coming back. Now, how this season goes might kind of, determine what he wants to do and if he wants to continue playing or not. But I just think that for me, the biggest question here was just kind of like, what is the rush? I mean, say he goes off, Bud Dupree does, in his age 32 season and racks up 10 sacks. Well, then you could decide to re-sign him. Obviously, the cost just went up, but then also he could leave and get you a compensatory pick, in that situation. So I just didn't understand that part of it. I think this is the part that makes me sleep easier at night. Trust in Jesse Minter. Obviously, this guy is bringing something to the table that Jesse Minter really wants on this team and wants to make sure they have on this team in 2025 and 2026. So I understand that because there has to be kind of some added value here that we're not seeing with at least the advanced metrics or what these grading scales are. I mean, I do just from the eye test remember multiple games just kind of being, annoyed or just kind of not really understanding, what he was bringing to the table in some of those games and just the ability to consistently make impact plays against the run and the pass. And he got a ton of snaps. I mean, you're talking about a guy who got 350 pass rush snaps last year. To your point, there is some uncertainty in this room in 2026, and it's not just Khalil Mack. Like Khalil Mack's potential retirement is always going to kind of loom over this team, especially because you're still hoping this year you think that you have an heir apparent potentially as that number one guy with Tui Tuipulotu. But I think it's also an insurance policy for Kyle Kennard because you have no idea what he's going to be like in his first season, or if you're going to feel like he's ready to be edge 2 for you in 2026 as a 2025 fourth round pick. There is value there. And I think the other part of this is, David, is just like you can tell with the Bradley Bozeman signing, you can tell with the Bud Dupree signing and extension, this is a team that is going to kind of prioritize being a locker room guy, being a part of the new culture and all of those things. And I do think that is kind of a double-edged sword. Like, it's great you want guys that fit all of those things, but those guys also have to produce on the field. And now when it comes to Bradley Bozeman or Bud Dupree, it's like, are there kind of some blinders here in some sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think there may be a little bit. And I think one of the things when you look at Bud Dupree and, one of the stats that jumps out is 17 games played. And we know with the Chargers that there every day, is it's more than a mantra. It's something that they want and expect out of the players. And, if you want to be tough and you want to bring that kind of demeanor and that play style, you have to have players that are available to be able to showcase that on a week in and week out basis. And, say what you want, but hey, 17 games and also 6 sacks. I mean, if we get, another 6-7 sacks for, up to $6 million, I think that's a pretty darn good investment as far as that is concerned when you're talking about. And also, he had a couple of passes defense, had an interception, had 6 tackles for loss as well. So he did provide some positive things, but I don't know how much stats he's going to have to put up, at least as far as sacks are concerned, to kind of get some bang for your buck.
Well, and that's the thing, though, is like you're talking about 6 or 7 sacks for up to $6 million in 2026. We don't know what he's going to do in 2025 yet. Like right now, if he just absolutely falls off a cliff in 2025, I don't think there's a bunch of money tied up to him in 2026. I don't think it'll be crazy to get out of. But the big thing was just why the rush, because you don't know what he's going to play like this year. There's nothing he's been able to do in this amount of time that you should be like, oh, okay, well, he's going to actually break out this year and be fantastic. So let's get him at this low price while we still can. This is a dude you signed after the draft last year. He wasn't a super hot commodity. He does bring things to the table. I don't want to make it seem like I don't think he does. But what I would say is what I can't tell is the added kind of value that he's bringing either in that locker room, because I'm not in there, or in Jesse Minter's scheme. He is a very physical player. He's a very disciplined player. All of these things are very important to a defense. But at the end of the day, you have to be consistently able to get to the quarterback. And if you're not doing it, you need to be looking for someone else that can do it better, because that's one of the names of the game. And the Chargers pass rush, frankly, was not good enough last year. So to extend kind of part of the problem there with Bud Dupree, even though I'm sure he's a great guy and a great locker room guy, you need production. So hopefully he can show in 2025 that this was a real bargain signing that the Chargers got ahead of. It's just hard to kind of see it at the moment. But it is a Fan Mail Friday, and we do have some fan mail questions to get into. But coming up next, we're going to talk about if J.K. Dobbins could be signing with a division rival and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much money I was spending on my baby. That is one of the things, all of the hidden costs that come along with becoming a new parent. And it's so great that Monarch Money came aboard with Locked On when they did, because it was such a blessing to have something like this to keep up with all of the new kind of added costs that came along with being a new parent, and just where all this money is going, how much is baby food and baby clothes and all the other expenses that come along with it. And it's so easy to collaborate with my wife on it. It makes it so much easier to keep track of everything. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. David, let's get into some more news that came out this week, and that is that Chargers former running back J.K. Dobbins, a hot name that many Chargers fans wanted to see, I think, back in the Chargers backfield because he was easily their best running back last season, is now visiting with the division rival Broncos. And that, feels bad. Like, it's one of those situations where the Chargers pulled a pretty unprecedented, at least unprecedented in their franchise's history, move of giving him an unrestricted free agent tender. Basically meaning if he signed with someone else after the draft, where it normally doesn't count against draft compensation or add to your draft compensation as far as compensatory picks goes, it would still count against it. And the Chargers right now are projected to get 0 picks. They decided to put this tender on J.K. Dobbins, which at least theoretically could give them a chance for a comp pick in 2026 when all the dust settles and all the contracts are punched in. And I wanted him to get signed, not just for the reason of, getting the compensatory pick, but the Chargers kind of did him dirty, because if he doesn't sign with a team before training camp, that means he has to play for the Chargers or he plays for no one. I was hoping it was an NFC team, but David, it looks like it might be the division rival Broncos that might bring in the Chargers' best running back of 2024.
Yeah, I hate that idea. I really don't like it at all, seeing J.K. Dobbins take a visit with the Denver Broncos. Like, my goodness, does it really have to be a team in the division? But when you strip away the Charger fan and you just look at the Denver Broncos, they do have a vacancy for a more veteran running back. They just drafted R.J. Harvey, who's probably going to factor in heavily into their, their running back plans, but they could definitely benefit from having a veteran who, can run tough, and J.K. Dobbins last year proved that if he's on the field and he's healthy, this guy can still play, and he can still rip off some big chunks, and he's still very productive. So I was hoping, like you, that it was going to be an NFC team and it wasn't going to be someone in the division, but it just always seems to happen this way. Obviously, no contract has been consummated as of this point in time, but it seems like that's a situation that could get done pretty quickly, and it makes a lot of sense for both of these parties.
Yeah, I think so. Putting all of your eggs in a rookie running back basket is always a little bit sketchy, especially if it's not, one of the kind of generational talents in the draft class, like an Ashton Genty or even an Omarion Hampton. But what I would say is, hey, easily J.K. Dobbins was their best running back last year, and his competition wasn't very stiff. It was, Kamani Vidal and Gus Edwards, who never really looked like a full version of himself. But what I would say is, he did have explosive runs, but there were some parts of J.K. Dobbins' game where the Chargers absolutely can improve on. I mean, I think last year, one of the things that absolutely killed them was just the early rundowns where they were taking no gains, taking losses, or taking minimal gains. That number should go way down now that J.K. Dobbins isn't here, and it's not necessarily his fault. But what I would say is they weren't always getting what was blocked for them last season. Now, as far as the analytics go, 23rd in yards after contact per attempt. That's probably a number that they can get better at this year. 30th in elusiveness rating last season. This is the one part where I think the Chargers could get a lot better. Last year, J.K. Dobbins only forced 4 missed tackles on 32 receptions. Last year in college, Omarion Hampton forced 21 missed tackles on 38 catches, more than half of his receptions, where J.K. Dobbins was basically doing it every 8 catches. He would make somebody miss. It was an added or kind of just something that never really worked for the Chargers in the passing game last year, was their running back passing game. That is somewhere where I hope they can improve. I hope, I wish J.K. Dobbins the best of luck. Hopefully it's not with the Broncos. I don't want to see him twice a year.
No.
But man, after the Chargers kind of decided to let him go, you get what you get to a certain extent. But in other news, the Chargers announced their training camp schedule, which is super exciting. The first day of Chargers open training camp will be Thursday, July 17th. If you want tickets to it, they are free. You have to have a Ticketmaster account, but you just go claim the tickets online and you can go. And I would highly, highly suggest it. But what I would also point out is something really cool. And that's the fact that the Chargers announced that 2 of their practices are going to be held at the University of San Diego, the USD, where Jim Harbaugh coached once upon a time, his first head coaching job at the collegiate level. And I think that, David, pretty cool to see the Chargers doing something, where San Diegans, because we know how many Chargers fans are still in San Diego, could have a chance to get to go.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, even 8 years after the fact, there's still a lot of hurt feelings there, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. Obviously, the Chargers were in San Diego for 56 years, and so there's obviously still a fabric of this team that's still interwoven in the city, however broken it may be at this point in time. But I appreciate the fact that the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, is trying to extend an olive branch to the city of San Diego, also kind of paying homage to his kind of lineage and his connection to the city of San Diego. So I love this. And I also love the fact that they are, having one of these at, a military installation. As I'm an Army veteran, and I really obviously love the troops. I really support them. I really appreciate the fact that Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers are giving some time, carving out some time for military members and their families.
Yeah, so the Tuesday practice, July 22nd, will only be for active duty service members and veterans, which I'm fully on board with. The part that annoys me, and this is no offense to any season ticket holder out there, is on July 23rd, that practice at USD is only going to be for season ticket members, which obviously I live in San Diego. San Diego is my town, and it forever will be.
Yeah.
It's harder than ever kind of to have season tickets if you live in San Diego now, even if you want to be a Chargers fan. So if you're going to do it in San Diego, which, again, you could be salty about. It does kind of feel like a smack in the face in some way, and I understand the fans that feel that way just because it's kind of like they're dangling in front of you. But I would say that if you're going to do it, let every fan have a chance to do it. Make it a first-come, first-served basis.
Open it to everybody.
Another separate thing or a certain amount that only go to season ticket members, for sure. But to have 2 practices in San Diego and not have, regular civilian, non-season ticket holder fans not have a chance to go to either one of those, I think is a missed opportunity at the very least by the Chargers.
I would agree.
But let's get to one more here from John Clark, one of our favorites, who says, teams whose fans travel well often make it tough for the Bolts at home in the past. I feel like things began to turn a bit last season. So is this the year when SoFi becomes a big home field advantage against teams like the Raiders, the Steelers, and the Vikings? What do you think?
I think that they're on the road to getting to a home field advantage. I think when you bring in Jim Harbaugh and you switch a team, going from 5 wins to 11 wins, if you heard the great saying, if you build it, they will come. If you win, they will come to the stadium. That's just what it is. I mean, especially in the LA market, there's a lot of tickets in town. There's a lot of sports. There's a lot of things to do. You got to be relevant, which means you have to win consistently. So last year was the beginning of that. This year, I think it will continue. I think there is definitely a fervor for the Chargers. I think there's an excitement for the Chargers. I think everyone knows that they are heading in the right direction, and I do feel like the support will continue to reflect that.
Yeah, and let me preface this by saying I wasn't at any home games last year, but I did pay a lot of attention just to kind of what it looked like at the stadium and how much the Chargers fans represented, as well as listening to the people who were in the stadiums to kind of give their thoughts on, what the percentages were in the crowd. And it did feel like last year was a turning point when the excitement for Jim Harbaugh definitely changed things there a little bit and got some buy-in from the people. Now, how much did they keep after the kind of the way their season ended last year and then they kind of were outed as frauds in the playoffs? That's the part that's hard to kind of gauge. I would also say that you're right. Winning definitely helps things. Then again, the Rams won a Super Bowl in this market only a couple of years ago, and that stadium is still getting taken over by other teams' fans left and right for the Rams after winning a Super Bowl. So I think having the excitement of Jim Harbaugh, having the Justin Herbert, all of those things, are going to help. Then again, you're still kind of a transplant team that moved from your home city who already had problems filling the stadium to a certain extent. So it's going to take a long time. It's hard to say when you're talking about big home field advantage for the Chargers to be able to create something that teams with much longer histories, much more historic kind of, histories have built, because those teams like the Green Bay Packers and the Steelers and, all of those teams have built it in the same market and built up fan bases who have passed it down from generation to generation, which is a little harder for Chargers right now. But we still have more great stuff to get into, including a couple potentially surprising names that could be on the Chargers roster bubble as we get closer to training camp, and also what position outside of quarterback the Chargers can least afford an injury. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, we still have some more great Fan Mail Friday questions to get into, and thank you to everyone who hit us up at Locked On LAC on Instagram, at Locked On Chargers, and also our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We always appreciate getting you guys' thoughts on what you want us to talk about, as always, and you guys always deliver for us, and we got some more great questions to get to today, but thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show with Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs as they keep you up to date with everything going on around the league so you can be the most informed NFL fan this offseason on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. We have another good question here, David, from Tino, who says, I keep hearing it'll be tough to make this 53-man roster. Which player is on the roster bubble that many people might not realize? Dave, that's an interesting one because we do think it's pretty competitive. Tougher to come up with a surprise name that's on this list. I think we might see one, at some point, but who did you end up going with?
Yeah, this one's a little bit more difficult because, I think you look across the roster, there's just not a lot of players that are not obvious, that guys that, are just being brought in to fill up the 90-man roster that are, or could be a surprise cut. But hey, the Chargers just re-signed this guy. And so I still feel like his roster spot is in danger. And I'm talking about wide receiver Jalen Reagor. And it's because of all of the other moves that they've made and also the other potential that they have in the wide receiver room, whether it's, bringing in Mike Williams or drafting Trey Harris or KLS or Darius Davis developing as a wide receiver. I just think there's only so many spots that are going to be available there in that wide receiver room. And I think, hey, with Quentin Johnson involved with that as well, I think, it could definitely shake out where Jalen Reagor is on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and I don't see that's the hard thing. It's hard to be super surprised by it just because it's like a numbers game at a certain extent, at a certain point. You know what I mean? Like Jalen Reagor right now could be wide receiver 7. Now you hear Sanjay Law talk about him, and talk about, oh yeah, you could do this with Vlad, you could do this with Jalen Reagor, and it's like obviously they really like him. What they love so much about him is much harder to kind of figure out, especially because, you went and drafted 2 wide receivers, obviously, in the first 5 rounds. And the other part of it is just like, he's probably wide receiver 7. And I'd say another person that comes on this list is Brendan Rice, who might not be as surprising, but it was a Chargers draft pick last season in the Jim Harbaugh era.
Yeah.
And he's probably wide receiver 8 at the moment, firmly behind Jalen Reagor. And I don't know if either of those guys are making the roster, because if they do make the roster, whose spot are they taking?
Yeah.
It's not Ladd. It's not Mike Williams. It's not Quentin Johnston, who I still have no belief in my mind that he's going to get cut before the season at all. And he's not going to make it over Trey Harris or Keandre Lambert-Smith, in my opinion, or Darius Davis, who's a special teams all-pro. Whose spot are they taking? Are they going to keep 7 wide receivers? We thought it was crazy almost that they would keep 6 last year. So it's just a numbers game to a certain extent. I'd say one that people probably don't think of is probably Scott Matlock. And this is my thing with Scott Matlock. Towards the end of the season, he basically was playing no defensive line. I know the Chargers love him because of his versatility, because not only can he play defensive line, but he's also the team's starting fullback right now. And he plays on special teams. Those are things that are always going to really ingratiate yourself to a regime like the Chargers have. But he was basically phased out completely on the defensive line towards the end of the season. And when he was on the field, he was not an impact player at that position. And then you get a guy like a Steve Klotz, right, coming in that maybe can do a lot of the same things, but bring a little bit more versatility as someone who's at least been an offensive player in his career at the college level. And I think at the defensive line position, Like, it feels like either one of him or Tito Abonia, in my opinion, is not a lock for this roster right now, because I mean, it is again a numbers game. I don't think they're cutting any of the guys they just signed. So that means to me, that means, Deshaun Hand, safe. Naquan Jones is also safe. And then you have Jamari Caldwell, who you just drafted. He's obviously safe. You brought back Tiertar, in my mind. He is safe as well. Okay, that's 5 guys right there. And then you talk about the other guys that are in that room. You have Tito Abonia, who's defensive lineman 6. Scott Matlock, does that make him defensive lineman 7? So you're going to keep a 7th defensive lineman, right? Just because he can play fullback? Or you're going to keep him at the defensive line, but then move on from Tito Abonia? Those are 2 guys the Chargers have drafted over the last few seasons where it's like, I don't think their spot is guaranteed at all. And I'd also throw Kamani Vidal in there because I think he could be in a roster competition with Rocket Sanders, because I think Hassan Haskins brings more to the table as far as making the team and bringing other stuff besides running the football. And when you have Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris, there's going to be other things they're looking for at that RB3 who's active on game day. But let's get to this one from Big Daddy E, who says, what position group outside of QB would be most negatively affected with an injury to a starter? Awesome work, guys. Appreciate all you do. Keep the content coming. We will. David, what position did you go with?
Yeah, this one was really, really easy for me, actually. It's tackle. If there's any injury to Joe Alt or Rashawn Slater, the Chargers are in major, major trouble. And I think we know that, considering who the backup options are, whether it's, Jamari Sawyer or whether it's Trey Pipkins, they're not great. We've seen that out there. It would be a travesty. It would be a very, very big issue if the Chargers had any injuries to their tackle position.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, it's Trey Pipkins for sure, and then Jamari Sawyer, I think, pretty clearly in that order. And I don't think you keep Trey Pipkins at $9 million a year or whatever he cost them this year if it wasn't going to be to play tackle or to be kind of your swing tackle. And with OTAs and Rashawn Slater being out, that's where he's been. He's been the left tackle in the times he's been out there. And I think the thing is I think you could be like, oh, what about guard? Because you're already kind of struggling there. You don't feel great about the guys you have. I think the argument against that is, okay, but the drop-off isn't nearly the same of what it's going to be with Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, 2 top 15 tackles in the league right now, and who that next guy up is going to be. So Trey Pipkins at least does have experience there. His better years were at tackle. Jamari Sawyer's probably best season was when he had to come in for Rashawn Slater and play left tackle. But yeah, I'd say it's tackle. I'd say the other kind of under the radar position there would be wide receiver, just because I think if anything happened to Ladd, he is the one guy where it's the one starter that will be impossible to replace. He is the guy that makes you feel good about that position because you have him and a bunch of guys who have question marks. But hey, if a couple of them pan out, you have them to pair with Ladd. If you don't have Ladd and now need Mike Williams to be your wide receiver 1 or Quentin Johnston to be your wide receiver 1, I'd say that's kind of an under the radar part, because I think you look at running back where you have multiple guys, safety, linebacker, cornerback, edge rusher. You have depth at all of those positions where it wouldn't be great, but you could figure it out if you had to. But let's get to this one from Tucky Luciano, who says, I say we get at least one major award this year. Offensive or defensive rookie of the year, MVP, offensive or defensive player of the year, coach of the year. David, do you think it can happen?
Yeah, I definitely think it can happen. I think right now in year 2, I think the one that to me is the most likely is coach of the year. And I think that, last year Jim Harbaugh should have had more of a bid for that, and obviously you got to win a lot more games. Even 11 just not quite enough at that spot. But
yeah.
I do feel like, with the way that they have really set up the roster here in year 2, getting more of the type of players they need to kind of institute the type of play they want on both sides of the ball. I think if they do really well and they take on this schedule with all of these playoff teams and they navigate it and they're able to really dominate, I think that would be a huge reflection on Jim Harbaugh, therefore definitely thrusting him into that coach of the year status.
Yeah, I think if he was going to win it, it would be last year. Personally, I think that's when it had to be, because I think a lot of it is based on expectations. And last year, coming off of a 5-win season, he was able to make a huge jump and add 6 wins on top of that, which is absolutely why he had an argument to be coach of the year last year. At least should have been a lot closer to it than he was. So it's tough. I think the Chargers would have to get into 13-win territory for him to, potentially think about coach of the year, for Justin Herbert to get into the MVP conversation. I think you'd have to get to at least 12, but probably 13 wins. I think especially for coach of the year, a lot of it's based on expectation. I mean, look at who's won it. Kevin O'Connell last year when they had Sam Darnold, no one expected anything. Kevin Stefanski when they had the Deshaun Watson situation going on, and they were also still competitive and a pretty good team that year, right? And you have guys like Brian Dable, who won it the year before that, who made the playoffs with Daniel Jones. Those are the kind of stories that win you coach of the year. Jim Harbaugh doubling the Chargers win total in year one, totally kind of changing the trajectory of what was a terrible situation under Brandon Staley. That felt like that was his best chance to do it. But either way, I think probably the most likely one is probably Omarion Hampton. We talked about it before. Not a great quarterback class. Only one quarterback taken in the top, 24 picks. And on a really, really bad Titans team. So that's the position that always wins it. And there's really only one guy on a terrible team there that's, I think you would have to be Ashton Genty, and then the tight ends, I would be like, okay, well, maybe one of those guys puts up a strong case. But I think Omarion Hampton, at this point, would have the best chance for it. We have one more funny one here that we have from Instagram. TJSE on Instagram asked a question I've never been asked before, which was, can you make an offense out of only Pokemon? So I did play a lot of Pokemon growing up. I'll get to this one quickly because I am only going generation 1, the big names. Quarterback, Alakazam, only 4'11", but a pocket magician, can levitate, so I'm not worried about the offensive line in front of him. Telekinetic arm, can have the ball go wherever he wants to. RB1, Raichu, electric with the ball in his hands. Fullback / RB2, Rhydon, 6'3", 264 pounds, who's tackling him, right? Wide receiver 1 for me, Mewtwo, 6'7", 269 pounds, but I'm not worried about the speed. Huge catch radius, but only 3 fingers on each hand. But they feel like they, have some sticky stuff on him probably. Wide receiver 2, Charizard. You need a deep threat. He can fly. Tight end, Ditto. And I'm having him turn into Antonio Gates. Now, that's just what I'm going to do there. So I really like my offensive line. Left tackle, I have Dragonite, 7'3", 463 pounds. Short arms, but literal wingspan. You know what I mean? Left guard, I'm going Snorlax. Maybe a liability as far as endurance goes, I would say. I don't
try getting around him or through him.
Try to get around him. He's 6'11", 1,014 pounds. So center, I went a little bit of Willie Lampkin here. I have Machamp, who can obviously snap the ball with one hand and have 3 arms to still block you with. If you have 4 arms, I want you on the line protecting Justin Herbert if it was him. Right guard, Gollum, 5'7", 696 pounds. He's a literal boulder. Right tackle, Venusaur, went a little off the books here, 6'7", 221 pounds. Light, but will tangle you up. I mean, let's be honest. It's going to be hard to get through them clean. So that would be my offense made out of Pokemon. I think I'm winning a lot of games there, but it's going to be a power running team, I would have to say for sure. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Thank you guys for your contributions to this Fan Mail Friday, for hitting us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, or on the Locked On Chargers Facebook page, as well as calling in to 323-524-7924 for those who sent voicemails. We had some really good ones that we'll probably use next week as well. But make sure you guys are back for Monday, because it is Buy or Sell Monday now that we're on our off-season schedule, including, is it an overreaction to think that Ladd McConkey is a top 10 receiver in 2025? I don't think so, but make sure you guys get your buy or sells in for that. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcasts from. But we'll be back with you guys on Monday as always. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.